Okay, guys, so today we are going to be comparing graphs. We're going to be looking at bar graphs, which is something new and we haven't really talked about, but I'm sure you've seen them before, and histograms, which we've been doing a lot of work with over the past couple of weeks. So, our learning targets for today is today we will work together to compare histograms and bar graphs. So, we're going to be looking at histograms and bar graphs and explore data intervals so we can use the data cycle to make sense of numbers, see patterns, and draw conclusions. I will know I have it when I can create a histogram and explain why we use different sized groups. Today, our primary purpose, as we were talking about today, in the data cycle, we're going to look at how data is organized and represent the data. Okay, so you should also have a comparing graphs independent activity, all right, that looks like this. This is where you will take your notes, and I'll also signal to you, hey, you should probably write this down. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at is I want you guys to do a stop and jot. All right, I want you to write down at least one thing that is similar and at least one thing that is different about the bar graphs and the histograms. Go ahead and take a moment to do that. Okay, so hopefully you guys were able to observe that there was space, that bar graphs, there is space in between the bars. Okay. Also, what I noticed was that for a histogram, as we've been talking about, there is no space. Okay. Also, hopefully you were able to notice that at the bottom, okay, or on the y-axis, there are words on a bar graph. And on a histogram, hopefully you guys recognize this, that these are intervals, okay, or numbers. And we've had a lot of work with this over the past couple of weeks. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. All right. So a bar graph versus a histogram. Bar graphs are good when your data is in categories. So as we mentioned before, in a bar graph, if you notice, the categories have to deal with words going across the x-axis or towards the bottom of the graph. On a histogram, these are what they call number ranges or intervals, as we had mentioned before. And if you need to write this down, please do. Okay? So, bar graphs, categories. Histograms have to do with numbers. And I'm just going to use the number symbol for that. Or an N. Okay? All right, so let's look at some examples. Examples of bar graphs. Exactly what we had observed before is that there is space between the bars, okay? And bar graphs are categorical data. So if you notice at the bottom here, the category data has to do with the months, okay? And how often you see something. Here's another bar graph that is actually turned on its side, but the meanings are still the same. There's still no space between the bars, and there's categorical data. As you can see, the categorical data has to do with the sports: football, baseball, swimming, basketball, and athletics. And then, of course, you have the frequencies on the side. And this would be a good opportunity to kind of write that down if you haven't already. Okay, here's another example of a bar graph, all right, that just basically is comparing the years. Okay, so they had 1980, 1990, and 2000. And then here's the frequency that it happened. Okay, but at the bottom, you still have that categorical data, or the C. Okay, now histograms. We've been talking about histograms a lot. And if you notice, there is no space between the bars. We have numerical data, and that numerical data is down here at the bottom. Okay, our intervals, okay, between 6 and 7. You've got 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and 11 to 12. On the sides, we have the frequency of one type of data is being represented, and they're looking at shoe sizes. And this was one of the activities that we did closer to the first week of school when we were comparing shoe sizes of 7th graders within our class. Okay. Another example of histograms, it continues with the same. We have our intervals at the bottom, okay? And then we have our frequency going up and down, all right? And the data is continuous, and they're comparing scores obtained in mathematics. All right, so now that we have looked at the two different types of graphs, I want to ask us a quick question. Which histogram matches the stem and leaf plot shown? Now, there's not a lot of work for us to do here, but I am going to point out a keyword, which is which histogram. Okay, please go ahead and select the best answer choice for this question. Okay, hopefully you guys chose A, okay, because A is a perfect example of a histogram. All of the bars, there's no spacing in between the bars, okay, as there are here. So this would be an example of a bar graph. And C is also an example of a bar graph, okay? So we were just able to pick out the correct answer by understanding the differences between a histogram and a bar graph without doing any work. Okay, so let's continue our talk with types of data. As we mentioned before, all right, we use two types of data to answer statistical questions. Numerical data, which is our N, which has to do with histograms, okay? And then we have our categorical data, a C, okay, which had to do with our bar graphs. If we recorded the age of 25 baseball cards, we would have numerical data. The key word there is age, because age has to do with numbers, okay? We would have numerical data. Each value in a numerical data set is a number. If we recorded the team of the featured player of 25 baseball cards, you would have categorical data. Although you still have 25 data values, the data values are not numbers. So categorical data is not numbers because it's related to the types of team. They would be team names, which you can think of as categories. Okay? So now what I want you to do is I would like for you to identify each of the following data sets as categorical data, so you would make a C, or numerical data an N. Okay, so let's do the first two together. It says heights of 20 7th graders. Heights we think of in numbers. Okay, so that would be numerical data. Okay. Letter B, your favorite flavor of ice cream for each of 10 7th graders. While you still have 10 7th graders, we're talking about flavors of ice cream, so that would be categorical. All right. What I'd like for you to do is please continue working on C, D, E, and F. All right, so let's check our answers. Hours of sleep on a school night for 37th graders. Okay, so hours is a number. Okay. Type of beverage drank at lunch for each of 15 7th graders. So it's talking about the beverage. So I would say C. Eye color for each of 37th graders. So eye color, I'm going to say that's categorical. And the last one is number of pencils in each desk of 15 7th graders. That would be numerical. Okay, please make sure that you double check your work. All right, and we will move on to our next activity.